then I would say, what's the maximum equity participation that you're willing to give to them? And what are the major milestones that they would need to hit that would cause you to feel that you were better off as a result of what they had accomplished, given the equity that remains for you?
I have a quick question. One of the success stories, I guess, today is I have been cultivating a potential funding source, a group of friends that I've made some contacts with, and I proposed kind of an idea of them investing a little bit of capital and consulting, basically, almost kind of like a consult for equity reverse
Yeah.
for us. And so he came back. One of the gentlemen, his name's Andy. He came back with essentially what's the suggested OA structure, operating agreement structure, and roles and responsibilities and exposures. So I wasn't sure how we would structure, like how I would structure it normally with this idea of a third party integrator concept, or I think that's what we would call them.
Yeah, so the obviously the duties are whatever you agree they're going to be. So I think what I would say is, from a role standpoint, this is how I see it. I'm going to be the managing member of the LLC, and you are going to be one of the operators, and we'll define the roles of the duties and responsibilities that you are going to be responsible for in an agreement that's an independent contractor agreement with you, that refers to, if they're participating in the operating agreement, that refers to whatever compensation you're to receive. And as long as you do those things, then you'll know what those roles are. That's going to be laid out in an agreement. So that's the first thing. The second thing is terms of the liability. As an owner or independent contractor to the LLC, there would be no liability as an investor or as a contractor except for your actions. Obviously, if
Okay.
you are an operator and you do something that creates liability for yourself, the structure of the LLC generally won't protect you from that. So, I mean, and then in terms of the relative contributions, however you want to structure it for them, is entirely up to you.
So technically the LLC, the SPV that has this acquisition, they would be essentially a vendor with some investment and consulting and the opportunity for equity.
You've got a couple of ways you can structure that. You can have your SPV is sitting as the owner of the operating entity. So you acquire whatever ownership or assets that are the operate. If you're acquiring stock, then there's an entity that sits under your SPV. If you are acquiring assets, then it's the SPV itself that's the operating entity. So let's say that it's an asset acquisition. If it's an asset acquisition, then you've got the operating entity is the SPV, and then you would sit generally as 100% owner of that. If you have an operator, you can do a couple of different things. You can have an operator that comes in as part of your ownership SPV, that own
Can
your
I give
whatever entity that owns that SPV, or you could have them come in as a contractor, which is kind of a sideways thing that says that they just have a contractual interest, which could be phantom equity or a profits only interest based on whatever they're going to do. If you're doing a CFE deal and you're bringing in an operator that's kind of sub under you.
can I give one bit of more context?
Yes,
Uh,
please.
so my son-in-law, it's automotive repair shops, which you guys know about. You know, you guys are well aware of these types of
Yep.
acquisitions. My son-in-law is the an auto technician, so I plan to place him at least in the first one as a manager, owner, operator of sorts. And this third party, these guys they're skilled in like HR and some marketing stuff and different things like this. So they're going to come in and help with maybe helping to systemize things and put some structure in place to help, a mom and pop kind of, be scalable essentially eventually. So that's kind of what they're going to bring to the table. I guess they were probably I think they want to minimize their time involved in this particular business and
Yeah,
obviously
so they
the,
they they ideally would set up their own SPV and
okay.
make their investment through that SPV into this entity, which would be a limited liability entity. So they'd have double protection because there would be, unless they were the people actually doing the auto repair work that could potentially create a liability individually for them, as simply passive investors, they would receive whatever they're going to receive, and they would be protected by the liability limitation nature of the entity that they've got, plus the SPV that they owned it in. So that they should be quite well protected if they set it up that way.
So regarding performance measures, I did ask them if they can, if we can hit certain performance measures that they're saying they can offer this expertise to increase sales. What, I guess, is there anything as far as the agreement? I heard you were talking about some out for them or an out for us to not have to pay them, the percentage that we have on equity.
Yeah, so one of the equity agreements that we've got that you guys have access to has all of that in it. So it's basically you can do reciprocal put calls, you can do just a call or just a put, you can do a vesting schedule that can be time based or performance based, and then that kind of gives you all the flexibility to I wouldn't offer all of that to start. I generally offer the thing that I would most prefer first, but I'm certainly willing, if the deal is appealing enough, to add some of those other provisions in.
What would you say as a response to them initially here? What would be like that first position to answer their question as far as their, how would we want to position on our side?
As far as the liability or as far as something else?
As far as they're earning additional equity based on performance, hitting performance markers.
I mean, it's just identify the milestones and what you would be willing to give them for it, right?
All right, that's it. That's all I have.
Yeah, and what you would typically do is you would say, hey, here, so okay, great. That's how do I decide what those are? Okay, so then I would say, what's the maximum equity participation that you're willing to give to them? And what are the major milestones that they would need to hit that would cause you to feel that you were better off as a result of what they had accomplished, given the equity that remains for you? So if you say, I've got this thing right now, and this is a good exercise for all of you, I've got this thing right now, and it's worth, let's say, $1 million. Okay, it's worth $1 million, and I've got this person that's going to, or group that's going to come in and do something, and they say they would like to have 40%, let's say. Okay, so they're asking for 400,000 in value. And you've got to say, okay, well, for me to give 400,000 in value, that's going to leave me with 60% of the company. So my value's gone down to 600,000. I need for that 60% now to be worth more than $1 million. So I would basically say, okay, so what do I do to figure that out? I would say basically I need 60% of some number equals at least 1 million, right? And so you would say, 1 million divided by 0.6. So I need them to add value to get the value to at least 1,670,000 roughly for that to have been a good thing for me. Because if I have 1,670,000 valuation, 60% of that is $1 million, right? But I'm not going to actually be happy with that. I'm going to want to have more than that. So what do I really want my value to be? Let's say the target is they're going to take the value to $3 million. Great. Then I can say, okay, well, now I know that if it's a $3 million valuation, then my 60% is going to be worth 1.8 million. I'm 800,000 ahead of where I was before. I was happy to give the 40% to do that. Does that kind of help in figuring out the math part of it?
Yes.
Okay. So
Absolutely.
now we can say, great. So you want 40% and we've determined that your 40% I'm good with, as long as the value that you add creates an additional $2 million in value. So now let's say, because we were at 1 million, we need to get to 3. So 3 million minus 1 million equals 2 million. That's the additional value they need to contribute. They want 40%. If I was going to say there's 4 things that you are going to do, and each of those things are going to add an additional $500,000 in value, then it would be really easy for me to say, each time you accomplish one of those 4 things, those are my 4 milestones, then you'll earn 10% of the company, right? And that way I'm always ahead and I'm always tracking towards the ultimate goal. Does that kind of help?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank
And
you.
for all of you, when you're thinking about this, that's the thing that people don't usually do, is they don't think about what's the additional value that I'm going to get as a result of having these people involved. When somebody comes in and you're looking to hire somebody and they're like, yeah, and I want 10% of the company, it's like, you know what? That's possible, but it's only possible if you give me a multiple of my investment in you of that 10%. And I'm not going to give it to you until the company shows that it has that value. So what we have to agree on now is what's the time within which you're going to achieve what specific things that we agree will create that value. And then you agree on that, and that's your contract.